Well, my name's Frank Busch. I'm from the NACCA Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. I currently reside in West Bank First Nation, British Columbia. I am Director of Community Engagement for the First Nations Finance Authority. First Nations Finance Authority accesses the capital markets for First Nations governments. So we actually have a banking syndicate that provides us with an operating line of credit that we use to loan monies to First Nations for infrastructure and economic development projects. So we actually issue bonds into the capital markets to raise those funds, and to date we've actually raised $517 million for First Nations governments. Well, we certainly understand in a community that some of the social issues they face seem very immediate in terms of responses from council, responses from band staff. But what we need to see is that economic development is the long-term solution. So you can develop social programs and that might help alleviate the problem at least partially. But in the long term, it's really going to be a healthy community with a healthy economy that ceases to have those major social issues on a First Nation. We have 81 members from across Canada, and they've undertaken quite a number of projects. One of our most recent success stories is Fisher River Cree Nation in Manitoba. So they undertook a number of projects. They actually invited us out for a very cold day in January, where we cut 4 ribbons on 4 different projects. They opened up 88 lots along their lake for cottage development. They reopened their convenience store as a full grocery for the members. They opened the 300th Castle Building Supply Center, and they broke ground on the Fisher River Hotel, Motel, and VLT Lounge. And I'm proud to say that just very recently, probably in the next few days, they're going to be opening their 1 megawatt solar farm that they built with monies provided by FNFA. I certainly believe that others should support the Aboriginal Financial Institutes and NACCA. One of the big things that they do is just provide information and awareness of how First Nations can access capital. Because I think for way too long our First Nations community have been going kind of hat in hand to Indian Affairs or other government departments and not really looking at where we can get money in the real game, in the capital markets. And they provide a tool to facilitate that in a very similar way that my organization does. But they're able to work with individuals and economic development corporations. A lot of time a First Nations government, if they want to undertake an economic development project that has some risk associated with it, they need to keep it from arm's length from the community for liability purposes. And NACCA and the AFIs allow them to do that. Well, I think it needs to be based around infrastructure. It's very hard to set up a business in greenfield. So, we do need paved roads, we need running water, water treatment, we need all those types of facilities so that private investment can happen in the First Nation. It's very difficult as a First Nations entrepreneur to be able to invest in a community that hasn't got the amenities that would be required to operate a business. So for First Nations to be able to access capital in order to run those pipes and pave those roads, it makes it an attractive environment for business to develop and for jobs to be created.
What do you say to the minister if they were watching? What would you say to them in terms of capital development? What's needed?
I think one of the big keys is housing. So Kevin Hart, the regional chief from Manitoba, has talked about the shortage of housing in First Nations communities across Canada, and I think it's been estimated about 175,000 homes that are needed. About 55% of the First Nations population now lives off reserve, and that's monies that are now going to other sources. They're not staying in the First Nations community. A lot of the times the people who leave are the ones who are most educated and most employable. We need those people in the community working and living on the First Nation so that they can spend their monies on the First Nation to help foster economic development. Yes, absolutely. The First Nations Finance Authority is really here to help communities build their own futures on their own terms. So one thing that we see happening with grant funding is that it's usually based around kind of a fad that happens. There might be one success story in a First Nation, and then it's applied by a blanket process to all First Nations. But we have to realize that each First Nation is unique and independent, and we need to deal on a nation-to-nation basis with each community. So when we go to a First Nations community, we always state to the Chief and Council, the people who know what's best for the community are right here in the room. They're not in an ivory tower in Ottawa, Toronto, or Vancouver. They're the people who live and work on the reserve. They know what the community needs. They just need to be given the ability to access the tools and resources to be able to make their own dreams reality. And when a First Nation has access to those kind of tools and capital, we see them succeed very quickly.